What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're taking a look at Gears 5, the first Xbox game to come to GeForce Now. We're going to be looking at it on the Ultimate tier with the 4080. We're going to look at some 4K gameplay at 120 and some 1440p gameplay at 120, both campaign, some of the open world like you see here, and some multiplayer. So let's start off in our 4K here, and you can see our stream here. I've got everything maxed out on the bit rate, and it's using all of that just fine here, and no HDR activated for this, and 4K of course for stream, and also in game for our resolution. So we're running native 4K resolution as well. I don't have any VSync on right now. We are setting our frame rate limits to 120 and unlimited on cinematic, and then just ultra on everything else as far as the preset. I didn't tweak anything. I didn't turn off motion blur like I normally would or anything like that. Just basically let the preset do its thing and see how things were going to run in 4K here. Alright, so we'll get into some gameplay, and the first thing I will make note of is your save doesn't carry over, unfortunately, here for the Steam version of Gears 5. Just something I happened to find out because I just have played the Steam version for the first time here, testing it for GeForce Now. So even though I have beat the game over on Game Pass for PC, my save doesn't carry over, so just be aware of that. You'll be starting over if you're going for Steam. Now, there should be more support for other storefronts and the like in the future. Now, as far as getting into the game, I wasn't super surprised to see it running really well here. It's been out for 3 or 4 years, and it's not super hard to run, even though it is a gorgeous game, and Gears 5 is certainly one that I've enjoyed playing through a couple of times. Now, as far as playing on 4K, latency was pretty good, and you can see what my round trip latency is up there at the top right. Typically like 17 to 20, 22 milliseconds there. And at 4K versus say like 1080 or 1440 on the system side, something you can't see here would be the additional input latency. So I wasn't really too worried, and I didn't have too much trouble with that with the 4K. It felt pretty snappy, pretty responsive, and everything looks gorgeous here in 4K for Gears 5. Now, switching over to 1440p here, things run just a little bit better as far as the frame rate goes. We have all the settings identical and the same except for 1440p now, and it might feel just a little bit snappier than the 4K. That's kind of like what I was talking about as far as higher resolution can take a little bit more time to render frames, and it's not often by much, but there can be a few milliseconds there that can make a difference. And I do tend to feel that just a little bit on 1440 versus 4K, but they've gotten things so good here. They're both very, very close and more than playable, especially for a game like Gears here in the cloud, running phenomenal here on GeForce Now for the 4080 Ultimate tier at 4K and 1440p. Now I want to move over to a different area of the game here, and we are again still at 1440p with a lot of stuff going on here, and we are able to pretty much get up to that 120 FPS a lot of the time. I would say in 4K you can still get there sometimes as well, and if you wanted to lower settings in 4K to high, you can certainly get yourself holding that 120 a lot more often. But for this video, I just really wanted to crank things up and see how the two resolutions would do. 1440p, not surprising to see myself able to hold that at 120 most of the time, and with 4K having its dips here and there. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and get ready to switch back over to 4K, and then we're going to take a look at some 1440p multiplayer. But over here in some 4K in the same map area, a little bit of different combat, you'll see frame rate's not going to hold as high as 1440p, but I wouldn't really expect it to, but it does hit 120 from time to time with those dips anywhere down into the 80s and in between that and 120. It feels great to play. I love a variable refresh rate like that as long as things are running really well and they feel snappy like they do here. You could certainly lock this game down to 60 if that's something you wanted to do, but for me this is much more worth it. This feels great to play through the campaign this way, whether I'm at 4K like here or at 1440p. Picture quality is fantastic. Latency feels basically local on here when it comes to this, especially at 1440. That 120 FPS makes a huge difference in the cloud. Speaking of which, multiplayer here, 1440p, 120 FPS held up extremely well, and when it came to latency and gameplay. Now, I haven't played Gears multiplayer in years, so I wasn't expecting to do much here, and I went into a pretty easy round just so I could run around and see how things were feeling, but much like campaign, maybe even snappier, things felt great here in multiplayer, and I did play a couple of different maps and try it out, and I was pretty confident to be able to just run in, gun, do what I need to do, and I didn't feel like I was going to have any stutters, hiccups, frame loss, or input latency problems that were going to really give me issue with multiplayer here. Now, it's not as twitchy as a first-person shooter, but it certainly does need really good input latency, especially when you get to close combat here. So multiplayer was a great experience for the Ultimate tier here for Gears 5 as well, and a great way to be able to go through and play that. So this ran great for me testing this out. Now finally, I do want to jump back over to 4K and get into the open world area here just a little bit. I finally got through enough gameplay, got out into the open world, and a lot of your time in this game isn't going to be so linear like a lot of the Gears games. It's really got a lot of open world aspect to it. So I want to see what performance would be like here, and looking at performance in 4K gives me a pretty good idea of what I can expect at 1440, which I also played a little bit of myself as well, and I was pretty much getting closer to the 120 most of the time with some dips here and there. And at 4K here, anywhere like the other areas, 80s to 120, which I was surprised, even in the open area, open world areas and all of that, it still holds its performance pretty well, almost as good as those linear levels that I was playing more in the beginning of the game. And that's something that I wanted to be able to check out, especially at the 4K here. And while it may dip more here and have to struggle just a little bit more than it did in other areas, it still held up really well, and actually even better than I thought it might here. But input latency, picture quality, 4K, 1440p, campaign, multiplayer, open world, either way, this looks fantastic and ran great for me. Anyways, guys, the first Xbox game to hit GeForce Now. It's really exciting to see what comes next, and this was a lot of fun to test here. I definitely recommend checking this out if you haven't already. As always, guys, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.